The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, and thanks for joining today's webinar looking at ways of optimizing Office 365 deployments so they add maximum value for your businesses. My name is Shona Bradshaw. I'm delighted to be joined today by Will Matthews from our partner Zscaler, who'll be taking you through the bulk of today's presentation. So I'm just going to very quickly run through a brief agenda and then get started. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Attendee lines will be on mute throughout the presentation, and do feel free to ask questions throughout, and those will be posed to Will at the end of the session. Today's session, we'll do a very quick Bytes introduction. I will keep it brief, as many of you know it already. Introduce Will, who'll be taking you through some of the challenges that companies are facing in deploying Office 365, and a new approach, a cloud-based approach to deployment, which can alleviate many of those challenges before a brief demonstration. So housekeeping for today, as I said previously, attendee lines will be on mute throughout the presentation, but we do have a Q&A at the end. Please post questions via the chat and the questions box, and I'll collate those and ask those to Will at the end. Today's webinar will focus on strategy and solutions around Office 365. We won't get into any commercial around specific products. Of course, those conversations are more than welcome after the webinar via your Bytes accounts managers. This session is being recorded, so we will make a recording available to all attendees at the end, so you can review at your leisure and pass that insight on with your team. Lastly, we do have a feedback survey at the end to make sure that these sessions continue to hit the mark for you content-wise. Please, if you could take 2 minutes to fill it in at the end, that would be much appreciated. So a little bit about Bytes Security Partnerships. Who are we? So we are the security specialist reseller within the Bytes Technology Group, and we've been focusing specifically on network and other areas of security for over 16 years. As part of the multi-billion Bytes Allied Electronics Group, what we aim to do is to marry up the agility and insight that you'd expect from a very small specialist partner with the global resources and the commercial expertise that you would from the very largest organizations. The core focus of our business is really on the quality of the technology consultants that we can wrap around and provide with our partners. We're very proud of our in-house support services and consultancy services. And what we're aiming to do is to make sure that each technology investment you make is supported and backed up and provided with maximum efficiency and delivery for your business. Where do we work across? So it's the spectrum of security, from the network, next generation firewalling area, through email security and content control, to access and authentication, mobile security, and increasingly we're speaking to customers and businesses around their movement to the cloud and how to secure that as well. Within all of those areas, what we aim to provide and what we offer to companies is that accredited consultancy technology delivery, support, project scoping, and in-house planning delivery services, and market and thought leadership, strategy development, technology mapping, so that businesses are able to come to us to future-proof their business against enhanced security threats and malware that's coming up at the moment. So why are we talking to businesses at the moment about Office 365 and easing those deployments? Office 365 is the most prevalent cloud-based email application out there. It's increasingly being adopted across UK and international businesses. But there have been, amongst those early adopters and people that are adopting it, known pain points limiting its success and what it can deliver to organizations. At the same time, many businesses are seeking a cloud-first, cloud-based strategy to maximize cost efficiencies and other efficiencies within their business. So what we are speaking to many customers about is how they can exploit cloud security technologies and cloud-based technologies that link to Office 365 to augment its success. With that in mind, all that it remains for me to do is to hand over to Will Matthews, who's a leading security engineer at Zscaler. We've been working with Zscaler for some years now, and they really do specialise in cloud-based web security, making sure that cloud investments are secure, deploying successful, and working with multiple organisations globally to ensure the success of their cloud deployments. So I'm hand over to Will now. You'll briefly see the introduction screen again before Will take you through the rest of today's presentation. Thank you, and over to Will.
Thank you very much indeed, Shona. I'll just share my screen. There we go. Right, can I get the nod of approval? That's now being broadcast. Can we?
It is indeed. Thanks, Will.
Jolly good. Right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Will Matthews, already been mentioned, and I'm an SE for Zscaler here in the UK. What we're going to talk today is about Office 365, but it's just dawned on me that not a lot of people, or some people might not be aware who Zscaler are. So I'll quickly touch on that. I'll ad lib because it's sans slides. But basically what we are is a cloud-based security provider, effectively. In a nutshell, what that means is that customers who subscribe to our service forward their traffic to us, be that from their headquarters, their data centers, their individual users sat in a Starbucks, basically from anywhere using a variety of methods, IPsec, pack files, so on and so forth, forward their traffic to us. And what we do is we apply security rules to that traffic. So what we do is we look for URL control, so we can control URLs. We control applications, things like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, so on and so forth. We also apply antivirus. We also provide cloud-based sandboxing solution, IPS, data leakage protection, bandwidth control. We also have next generation firewall on there as well. So that's us in a nutshell. You forward your traffic to us, and then we provide the security on that regardless of where you are. So it doesn't matter whether UK, Japan, Starbucks, a hotel, or wherever. So that's us in a nutshell. What I'm here today to talk about is Office 365. And Office 365 is by any measure been a fantastic product. I mean, we're consumers of it here ourselves, and it's brilliant. One of the problems, however, is we found with the rollouts, you can either come out looking like a hero, or you can either come out looking like a villain, unfortunately. And that's because with a Office 365 rollout, there are an awful lot of gotchas, and Microsoft. No, the word prescriptive would be unfair, but Microsoft do have some guidelines. So we're going to go through those guidelines and see how they marry up to probably what you're doing already, what sort of network, how your network infrastructure looks already, or perhaps you've moved on a little bit, but how it looks already. We'll also look at, like I say, the Microsoft recommendations, and then we'll take a look at what Zscaler can do to help in those situations. So Office 365, 70% of the Fortune 500 companies are using Office 365. We have about 700 customers currently using our service, and we transfer and transact a vast array of that traffic already for these type of companies. This is just a slide highlighting who we use. One of the things that Zscaler's done rather successfully is that as a company, we've always sold to extremely large organizations. Historically, if you go back 9 years ago when we first started, we were very successful in selling our solution to organizations that were considered quite large. Our biggest customer is the NHS, 1.6 million users. What we've done since then is allow that to come down to smaller and medium-sized enterprises as well. So a lot of the issues that these really big customers have at the start were ironed out a very long time ago, and what Zscaler has done is improved and refined our service over the last 9 years to be able to address any sort of situation or any requirements for connectivity to us. Part of which is people's ambition, as Shona said, to do a cloud-first strategy, and as part of that, people are rolling out Office 365 and using our service to benefit them. Right, so connectivity guidance. These are Microsoft's official pearls of wisdom on deploying Office 365 or integrating your network with Office 365. And they can provide something of a hurdle for some people, and this is where the villainy or the hero-ness sort of starts to work in. They do talk about access points or local breakout points, which is something of a challenge for a lot of customers, because a lot of customers do have that model whereby, you know, everything goes to the DC and then breaks out to the internet. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Unhindered access to Microsoft. This is talking a little bit about proxies here. Microsoft does not recommend the use of proxies, and we come on to that as well. Local DNS resolution and optimizing connectivity to Microsoft's global network. So these are the areas that we're going to touch on when we're talking about Zscaler and Office 365, and it's basically those 4 key points that we'll try and resolve. So local network egress. Previously to working at Zscaler, I've been at Zscaler a year. I worked for appliance vendors, so I worked for people like Tipping Point, Checkpoint, Palo Alto Networks, and I spent an awful lot of time convincing people to invest in this sort of infrastructure where you've got satellite offices and then a central data center with several hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of dollars worth of 2U high rack-mounted equipment that provides a security channel or a security stack for your users to gain access to the internet, and that works from a certain point of view. It does fall down, and we'll touch on those in a minute. But the first thing that you've got to see from this type of model is that, well, cloud apps are designed for direct access. What Microsoft explicitly say that you should really have direct access to Office 365. It will also add unnecessary latency, compromises user in costs for MPLS links. The punchline to that is that, first of all, Microsoft Office 365 does introduce a lot of bandwidth utilization. We typically see between 20 and 40% increase in the amount of bandwidth required to get to Microsoft Office. Depends on what you're using, depends if you've just got an email rollout, for example, or whether you're using the full gamut of Microsoft Office 365 products, but we do see a rise in 20 to 40%. So you will see an increase in the amount of throughput. You will see an impact on those appliance-based firewalls and IPS and goodness knows what else, SSL decryptors, all that sort of stuff. There will be a impact on those. And the knock-on effect is obviously the user experience. The more connections you push through, the more bandwidth's taken up, the more strain you put on your appliances, does sort of equate to a bad overall experience. The problem being that, you know, when people are trialing Office 365, they might put themselves on it, and then, you know, 10, 15 test users, and then a department, and then an office, and then it starts to scale and scale and scale, and they don't necessarily pay attention, and I don't want to say that in a derogatory way, but don't necessarily always notice the amount of throughput and the strain and stress it puts on the network and the network equipment. So this is the sort of where we are, and this backhauling approach, by and large, doesn't work. That's not to say we don't support it. It's not to say we can't do something to help you here, but just be aware that this would go against what Microsoft recommend. This is the way we refer to this until is 90s technology, which I guess is fair enough. If static users, i.e. users that are stuck on a network, on a local network across a wide area network, is one issue, then the users at a remote are an entirely different issue altogether. So, yeah, this is a bit like Star Wars. There we go. Darth Vader will turn up in a minute. So mobile users for this type of stack of security has for a long time been something of an issue, broadly speaking. How do you get VPN users securely, or mobile users I should say, securely to not just Office 365, but to the internet as a whole? Typically, it does mean that you have to send people down through your local network and then back out, sort of tromboning the traffic through your security stack. That's a bit exaggerated there, I admit, but your firewalls and your IPS and your URL filters and all that sort of good stuff, traffic does have to trombone through there. More often than not, users do have vast amounts of bandwidth available to them as well when they're off the network, and it's not too difficult to imagine that starts to choke things and is a little bit unmanageable. The other downside to that is that VPN clients and policies and all that sort of stuff that you load onto those machines, if indeed you do choose to load that stuff onto those mobile machines, can also be problematic in its own rights. So that's part of it. The second part of it is this whole issue of ExpressRoute. ExpressRoute is a service that Microsoft provides that basically offers a direct link into Office 365. Interestingly, though, Microsoft no longer recommend Office 365, sorry, ExpressRoute for connectivity to Office 365. But the punchline to any of this and all of this is that, again, the user experience is not great. So in a nutshell, with a traditional way of doing things, and I'll sort of put my hand up and say, well, I was sort of pre-sailing or selling these sort of solutions for the last 20 years. The punchline is that when it comes to not just Office 365, but in general, the user experience is extremely poor. And again, it's expensive to deploy and manage. You know, you've got to, not least of all, you've got to concern yourselves about the routing. You've also got to worry about Microsoft made very strict, not strict, prescriptive instructions on TCP window sizes and all that sort of stuff. And then you've got complexity of the routing itself. So you've got issues like asymmetric routing is the first thing that springs to mind when I look at this. And all sorts of things can go wrong here. So much so that Microsoft do recommend a longer consultancy period when they start talking about deploying ExpressRoute. So Microsoft has a review policy ensuring that all parties are aware of this 2 to 6 months of planning extra complexity. Basically, you're sticking another link in your network, and it's going to create problems. This is from a guy who used to chop up networks and stick boxes in the middle of it. That's adding extra routes and that sort of stuff is going to be problematic. Right. So next option then, okay, so you've decided that sending it all through the main data center and backhauling traffic from all around the globe to your DC isn't quite as magical or as brilliant as you might have hoped. Might be therefore to install firewalls and routers on different sites. And this tends to be based on the size of the remote site. So sometimes it kind of makes sense. If you've got a very large office or a secondary very large office, putting in another pair of firewalls, some IPS functionality, proxies, SSL decryption, all that sort of good stuff. So it's kind of makes sense, and then disaster recovery. But as the sites get smaller and smaller, that starts to become increasingly more problematic again. So, not only have you got to, maintain, stack, rack, power, absolutely everything else for your DC, but you've also got to do it for these remote offices, and then finding the right products to be able to deliver that and making sure that you get a uniform security policy across that can also be challenging, again, depending on the technology you've chosen. So it's not always cost effective to do it. It's not always best practice to do it. And yeah, it's this approach. The main people who I've experienced in the past with this have been sort of retailers who have a large number of sites. But I think nowadays it applies to absolutely everybody. But this sort of approach is more trouble, perhaps, than it's worth. So direct access good. Having to manage and maintain lots of appliances all over the globe, not so good. It puts a strain and stress on the infrastructure and the infrastructure managers and pretty much involved with sort of delivering this kind of thing. So mentioned earlier that it puts a strain on the equipment. So this is, in my opinion, perhaps a little bit hyped, but the truth of the matter is that most firewalls, routers, IPS technologies, all that sort of good stuff, do have a limited amount of cache. The idea of these systems is to take sessions in and kick them out as quickly as possible. Most people, when looking at this type of technology, are very conscious of throughput, latency, jitter, all that sort of good stuff, and the vendors themselves do an awful lot of work to address that. Tends to fall down a little bit when you have something like Office 365 that generates an awful lot of sessions. Now, here it mentions that the 12 to 20 connections per user. I've seen substantially more than that. But all these connections obviously got to be natted in some way. They've all got to be held in a session table some way. They've all got to go through the usual policies on the firewall in the usual way, and it's put strain on them. There's no getting away from that. And particularly when we start talking about network address translation and applying NAT or hide NAT or can't remember the other phrase for it, NAT to a large number of sessions as well. What we have seen is that firewalls start running out of steam. Those caches that you have start to run out of legs and things start to break. Painful thing about that sort of problem with a firewall, and this is from practical experience, is that the firewalls that I've dealt with in the past, and not just Checkpoint and Palo Alto, but a host of others as well, tend not to be too I don't know, too great at explaining what's gone wrong. And some users will connect, some users won't connect, and troubleshooting and debugging that sort of stuff can be quite painful. So this goes through that. Again, the impact on the user experience is again a poor experience. They can't get to it. The things is not only slow, but sometimes they can get to it, sometimes they can't get to it, and again the whole thing's problematic. So you can see where we're going with this, and bear with me a second as my mouse appears to have died, is that there has to be a better solution than backhauling traffic, getting what you want from direct access to the internet, and in addition Office 365, without the complexity, without the strains and stress, without having to worry about latency, throughput, and all that sort of good stuff as well. And that's really where Zscaler comes into play. The idea is that with Zscaler, and this just doesn't apply to Office 365, it applies to us in general, is that we effectively host in the cloud a lot of that equipment. So the firewall, the URL filter, the antivirus, the sandboxing, the IPS functionality is hosted in the cloud. I was told this wasn't a commercial thing, but you effectively pay a user license, and the amount of bandwidth that you use, the amount of throughput you require, is totally not your problem. It's Zscaler's problem. So you pay a user license and you send all your traffic to us, and we make sure that there's enough resilience there. We make sure that we use N+1 resilience. We make sure that there's enough throughput there. We make sure that it doesn't matter how many tick boxes, sessions you send, how much SSL decryption you want, all that sort of good stuff that usually associated with appliances is our responsibility. You just pay your subscription to us, and we effectively take care of all that side of things. So direct to internet with Zscaler Cloud is fully compliant with Microsoft. They actually recommend us. We've got a great relationship with Microsoft, which works out really well. They come to us, which is kind of interesting because obviously we're not a huge company by any stretch of the imagination. Microsoft is, but they feel that we've got the best solution for dealing with Office 365. So they attend our events, they come and talk to us, and we have worked through things like Azure problems and whatever else. So Zscaler does address a lot of those issues around getting traffic to the internet and getting traffic from users, regardless of where they are, to the Office 365 CDN or the content delivery network in the most efficient and best and least problematic way that's possible. This is, I've already covered much of this stuff here, so we'll not worry too much about that, but there you go. So what do you get with us? You get a full control policy admin. Although we talk about cloud, it sometimes sounds a little bit like it's a hands-off solution. The look and feel of the products or the Zscaler service is very much like an appliance. It's just not hosted on your network. Now, it's not an appliance. What you have is a cloud, and we have like I say, an N+1 that's loaded up with this hardware that we've designed to be able to handle and control these connections going through it. But you do have full control. You can build policies around users, and we can follow the user policies. So it doesn't matter whether the guy wakes up in London, toddles to an airplane, goes to Tokyo, the policies for that particular user apply, and we integrate with ID providers, Ping, Okta, Azure, ADFS, all that sort of good stuff, LDAP, Active Directory, of course. So in terms of control, we provide everything that you would expect. In terms of information, we offer sort of, I'm going to say, a fantastic level of visibility. We offer a great level of visibility that allows you to see top-down global dashboards, drilling down to very, very low level packet information in a very straightforward way, and it's all real time and actionable. So you can take a look at what's going on and then apply a policy to control it. So again, the Zscaler stuff is not taking away any functionality that you're familiar with. What it's doing is simply taking away the problems associated with this type of technology, which is what a lot of people want. You know, if you're a gas company or a motor car company or a local government or something like that, that's your business, right? You're either a local government, you're not a security company. And we feel that it's not your responsibility to manage and maintain security infrastructure. What you're supposed to do is sort of design the policies and be able to handle situations as they arrive without those sort of issues. So that's the first thing. Getting your traffic to Zscaler avoids all the issues with the more traditional approaches to connecting to Office 365. Unhindered access to Microsoft. This is another requirement that Microsoft have. Proxies. It doesn't just apply to proxies, it also applies to firewalls a little bit as well, is that they have some limitations, and for a moment we have to step back and again look at the design goals for appliance-based technologies. You know, they are trying to get away with as much as possible for as cheaply as possible to sell it as high as possible, and I don't want to sound, that's just the way it is. I'm not picking on any particular vendor there. So much so that, you know, a couple of devices on your network are going to struggle with type of connections that Office 365 require, particularly proxies. And again, there are typically sort of limitations. So they deal with high-lived, high-throughput sessions. Again, that's due to memory constraints, cache constraints, architectural constraints in some cases. Traditional proxies force everything through port 80 and 443. Okay. SSL inspection breaks Office 365. So Microsoft don't recommend you decrypt Office 365 services. And that's kind of an interesting one because obviously a lot of us are quite keen on getting into that. And we as a company, Zscaler, are quite keen on breaking into SSL, analyzing what's in it, re-encrypting and sending it on. It's something that we provide and something new. Microsoft don't recommend that at all. And perhaps we take that offline and talk about how you would secure then things like Box.net and OneDrive. But yes, so SSL breaks Office 365. Hub and spoke architectures, internet gateways, add latency. Yes, we've already established this. Going through your central DC. Skype for Business not advised. Don't handle UDP well. It doesn't handle UDP well. I think it's probably the proper phrase. But yeah, traditional proxies, yeah, they're kind of fine if you want to allow people to get to fred.com and sort of static web pages. As soon as things get to a little bit more higher level of sophistication, they do tend to fall into a heap a little bit. And, you know, increasingly the way that apps work, not just Office 365, but certainly does include Office 365, traditional proxies don't play well. It's the fairest thing I can say. One of the big problems with more traditional mechanisms, and this applies to firewalls and proxies and maybe even URL filters a little bit, and potentially IPS, I guess, is that Microsoft have decided in their infinite wisdom that they want to be young and agile and keep up with their competitors, which is fair enough. And for a large company like Microsoft, that's quite a challenge, right? To that end, what they've done is that they've said to the industry, or said to effectively you and I, is that we will make changes to our back end as frequently and as quickly as we want. If we need to change something on our Office 365 back end to make it more efficient, more flexible, blah, 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 then we will do that. Which, from their point of view, is great. From our point of view, and I include the audience in that, that's not so great. And that's because, by and large, you know, we don't have organizations don't have the capacity to constantly be changing rules on proxies on firewalls to maintain these changes that Microsoft made. Usually the first thing that we hear is that something's not working anymore. You I try to go on Outlook, it doesn't work anymore. Oh goodness! And then the whole company can't get on Outlook, and then there's lots of flapping around as people try to figure this out. Also, the initial configuration can be quite problematic as well. Even the next generation firewalls, and I'm not saying bad things about them; they are great products. But the next generation firewalls, setting up Office 365 to work through those can be quite a challenge. The typical mechanism is you have 3 PCs in front of you. One's got the firewall log viewer on it, one's got the firewall policy on it, and the other one's got Office 365 on it. And then you check to see if you can get to SharePoint or I don't know, Word or whatever you want to get to on Office 365. You look for the reject packets in the log, and then you make a change on the policy. And this is quite a painful sort of cycle in itself. Most firewalls between 17 and 20 rules, adding bare minimum to get it sort of working. And that's not the end of it, because like I say, Microsoft constantly change and everything else like that. So one of the things that we've done is we've introduced a one-click configuration. So in line with our usual sort of way of doing things, right? Don't you worry, Mr. Customer, about latency and bandwidth requirements and all sort of good stuff. It's that we, Zscaler, have taken on the responsibility of maintaining the rules required to allow Office 365 to work. So as far as you're concerned, as a potential customer, as an actual customer, you tick a box that says allow one-click Office 365 enable, click it, and that's the end of your problems, essentially, in terms of allowing it through, which is great stuff. Again, it takes away that administrative overhead and the potential outage problems that can be associated with that. So there's a first. There we go. Automated configures a whitelist, exempting Office traffic from authentication and SSL description as recommended by Microsoft. So literally by ticking that box, you're doing what Microsoft recommends, and they've worked with us to establish that. Zscaler fingerprints all Office 365. We won't have to worry about your changes. So that's it in a nutshell, which is good. And I've seen this in action, and it's from my experiences of setting up Office 365, this is far and away better than current experiences. So that's the unhindered access. So in localized network egress, we can address that. Unhindered access to Microsoft, we work with Microsoft quite a lot to be able to offer a solution that works for everybody and works as elegantly as possible. Next thing is local DNS resolution. DNS, obviously, if it's not resolved quickly, can make life truly miserable for people. that's putting it mildly. It's fine in sort of, in the example I give here, which is a San Jose user. San Jose is San Jose Office 365 fandabby-dozy. That's not going to be a problem. It becomes a bit more of an issue when the users going through a different connection or using a VPN to gain access to that local DNS resolution is not necessarily going to work. The other issue as well is the way that geolocation typically works for these kind of things. It's either looking at the last DNS resolver, or it's looking at the egress point. So if you're going through a VPN or through some NATed gateway or something like that, you're not necessarily going to be going to the nearest DNS, and therefore things start to look a little less promising. This is just a quick example of that. The user in San Jose, everything's tickety-boo for him. He's got a 12 millisecond response, whereas if you're being routed through Atlanta, then you've got a number of, this is from an actual example here. You can see that's adding a lot of latency, a lot of problems, and without saying anything too bad about Microsoft, some of their protocols are not quite as latency friendly as people might hope in some regards. This is why they recommend that you have local DNS. Optimize connectivity to Microsoft's network. So this is the fourth and final thing when we start to talk about Microsoft and connectivity. Obviously, what we've done as an organization is we've built data centers around the globe. We've got over 100 of them. They're not all listed here because the graphic gets pretty ugly pretty quick. All these data centers are constantly monitored. We have these nodes called Zens. These are our own equipment that we put into these data centers. And like I said before, they're N+1 resilience. They're load balancers, monitored, updated, maintained, managed, and everything by us. What we do as part of that is that we monitor the individual nodes in our data centers, and if the performance or the throughput of one goes above 23%, then a whole procedure starts to take place where we talk about upgrading that particular data center and adding more nodes to increase its throughput. It's designed that if the internet throughput or the internet requirement leaps by 60%, then we are able to cope with it. One of the big leaps in internet usage was Donald Trump's inauguration. So back in January this year, when Donald Trump was, we saw a massive spike. But because we have this policy of having enough throughput to be able to handle a 60% increase, then it had no effect on our overall service. And that's simply part of what we do, which is actually really great from a customer point of view, because like I say, when I was selling appliances, this is one of the major concerns. How do I scale for big changes in the internet? So we handle about 30 billion requests a day. That's significantly more than Google. And is it fair to compare Zscaler to Google? Google does one thing, we do another thing. It's just an idea of scale. We do transact a lot of sessions going through us, 125 million threats blocked every day, and 120,000 unique security updates. So we're constantly updating and maintaining our service with it to protect you against malicious malware, viruses, bad URLs, and all other sort of good stuff. Now, when you're building a network like that, when you build a network, what we've done is that we have put our data centers in tier 1 service providers around the globe. It makes sense. They've got the best connections coming in, the best connections going out, and again, it provides a great user experience. The red ones on the picture are the data centers where we peer with Microsoft. So literally Microsoft is in the same building as us. So what happens is that if you connect into one of these data centers, one of the Zscaler data centers in London or Paris or Amsterdam or Denver or wherever, it's just a single hop piece of Ethernet is the joke we use to the Microsoft CDNs as well, content delivery network. So you come into us. This means that you get a fantastic experience, and not only Microsoft in those two. We people like Adobe and some others, Box.net, are also located in those data centers. So we've got a lot of design and a lot of relationship with Microsoft, which allows us to provide an extremely good service. So I'm not going to go through those points, but yes, so Zscaler pairs with Office 365 in major data centers around the globe. Zscaler provides the best 365 connectivity, or appearing in most major exchanges, 1 to 2 milliseconds. Cloud platform scale to handle a high number of long-lived connections. Solution designed from the ground up to be able to do exactly this kind of thing. The optimized TCP stack, I'll come on to this in a moment, but Microsoft with their ExpressRoute recommended some modifications to TCP window size, and yes, we've done that. We can show the benefits of that in a moment. And network path option, fast and local DNS and fewer network hops. Well, yeah, sure. If you're, I've seen the benefits of this personally. Now, I think sometimes in the UK, it's easy to be a little bit cynical. Our internet is not so bad. And the connectivity we get is not so bad. But I had a customer recently who was trialing the Zscaler solution. We tend to recommend people, if they're interested in us, they get a POC and we help you configure it, all that sort of stuff. Was testing us with Office 365, and he was actually quite excited. And he was quite excited, and yeah, maybe I was a little bit jaded, or not jaded, but a little less excited, was he showed me himself connecting to an Office 365 SharePoint instance. Without Zscaler, it's taken about 20-25 seconds to fully render the screen. With Zscaler, it was taking, well, it was just normal sort of loading time, sort of 2 seconds or something like that. So it does have an effect. And again, it's that whole issue of we're peering with them directly, and we're peering with them in the right places. So if you can get to us, you can get to Microsoft, sort of thing. And people do see a performance impact regardless of where they are. I've also done some work for people in China and Thailand and various other places in the Far East. and the improvements were quite astonishing there as well. Microsoft Video and Network, yeah, good. Deliver the best. So Zscaler deliver the best Office 365 experience, remove adoption hurdles with direct internet, provide application visibility and control, which is things. Office 365 traffic growth through Zscaler. Again, this is just an example of what we're doing to help customers. So 27 times growth over 3 years. Our solution is elastic. And I'll say it again, we don't care about how much bandwidth you send through us. We also don't care how many tick boxes you switch on as well. So the whole solution is designed where every tick box is ticked on and it's doing something, including SSL decryption. So if you come back to me and say, well, I need to decrypt, I don't know, 5 gig of SSL real time, then that's not a problem for us. The same with all your IPS switchings on and everything else like that. The idea is that we're scalable and we can handle that sort of stuff. So when it comes to, you know, in this example, mailbox migration from a large customer, there's a bit of a spike there. It's no concern of ours almost. The capacity is there. We don't look at you as an individual customer in this regard. We look at you as a service that we're providing, and therefore it's already built in. Direct internet connection with Zscaler's cloud security platform. I think we've already pretty much covered this off. So rapid deployment, no hardware to manage, cloud scale of platform to handle high session counts. Our service is designed to handle it. Automated rules and URL filtering and that sort of stuff to work with Office 365. We do provide bandwidth controls, so the ability to make sure that YouTube does not take precedence, as an example, over Office 365 is certainly possible. No VPN required for mobile users. Packfile, there is an agent, it doesn't use a VPN, it's just a simple bit of software that forwards traffic to Zscaler. Makes for a much easier life. You design a policy, you say, right, nobody can get to this particular type of site, I don't want people downloading viruses. Like, click in the box, it's applied absolutely everywhere, instantaneously, with no hassle and no drama and no requirement to drag people into the office or not go on site and push policies to obscure little firewalls in the back of it. No, none of that stuff. It's a cloud service. Click the button, it's gone. Full security controls for non-Office 365 internet traffic, pretty obviously, we can do that. Simplified policy management, global visibility into it, yes. It's everything that you sort of got familiar with your appliance-based model, but as a cloud. Again, we take away the pain and leave you with what you're familiar with. How well is Office 365 adopted by your users? So we do offer a level of visibility, and it's an example of one of those screens. We give you feedback on the Office 365 that's going through it. This is just one example. You can see real-time traffic. Yes, you can see when Office 365 is popular, when it's not popular, what times of the day, which the offices are the biggest hitters. You can also see the top users as well and give you an idea. And, you know, again, from that, you can investigate people are working. Maybe it's a trend, maybe it's not, maybe they're just obscure. But you know, this sort of information is interesting, and it's good to be able to drill down on it and get. You also get this sort of information that allows you to see whether it's being used or not. This is actually from a real life example. OneDrive traffic is still low. Is Box still being used? So the example here is that, well, nobody seems to be using Office 365. I need to know what other file sharing apps people are using. You know, are they still using Box or more prevalently, I should say, Dropbox, when they should be using OneDrive? So you get a whole gamut of information that you can turn into, you know, genuine business outputs, which of course people like and is of course entirely necessary in the world today. Zscaler purpose-built cloud. I'm not going to go through all these. I'm a bit aware that I'm probably overrunning, and I've already mentioned all these things. We offer access control, threat prevention, and data loss prevention. So we can help you in all these areas. I will leave that there for a few seconds. There we go. Right. We do offer a cloud firewall. It's a proper next generation firewall, in so much that it identifies applications, web-based applications. It can also recognize ports and protocols on any port. So if you, for example, run SSH through port 123, which is standard NTP port, firewall will go, oh look, that's SSH, it's on port 123. So it does have that application awareness. It's a proper stateful inspection firewall. We do use obviously user identity awareness, but you can control based on IP address as well as you would expect. The other thing, again, I say non-performance impacting SSL inspection. This is it's a huge issue from my experience of selling other technologies, and I think people are just literally waking up to the fact that a lot of stuff they've been buying is not cutting the mustard for the SSL decryption that they require. Again, it's not an issue with us. So bandwidth control, yeah, I think that's fairly self-explanatory. The idea is that you can guarantee bandwidth or cap bandwidth for particular services and applications is extremely useful. And again, it goes back to making sure that people, you come out of the Office 365 experience or the Office 365 deployment as a hero rather than a villain. And this is fairly key to be able to provide that. Windows scaling is optimized for faster file downloads. Couple of takeaways from this. This is an example of how TCP Windows handled with Microsoft without Zscaler and with Zscaler. The only sort of key takeaways are obviously it scales a lot quicker and a lot faster, so you're getting the best performance for downloads with the Zscaler. It's also goes a lot larger too, so the Windows scale of over 4 megabytes is supported, whereas obviously without it, it doesn't get much beyond 3 megabytes. It's far more elegant, and therefore again, you with the Office 365, you are getting an overall better experience. Don't take our word for it. There's an organization called Catchpoint. They did some testing. You can take a look at their site, catchpoint.com. The reports on there for people to take a look at. But they look at the user experience. So they wanted to compare a direct internet connection versus Zscaler cloud security platform, and they wanted to see how well it worked out. Now we can actually, if you do go along with the idea of a POC, we can actually facilitate this sort of testing as well. You can do it yourselves, and we actually encourage people to do it during their testing. But this is the results that they got. Downloads, Zscaler delivered 40% faster download speeds in Chennai, which is obviously in India, Frankfurt, Hong Kong, so on and so forth. But you're seeing a performance right the way across the board. He says that before looking. Yeah, so performance improvement right across the board. And again, that's because we've modified the TCP stacks. We've changed the window size. We're peering in all the right places. We're doing all the right things. So, these downloads are naturally going to be a lot better. DNS resolution times. Again, we were 8 times faster. Again, that's down to the fact that, things have been done in the proper way. And again, it all helps with that experience for users. You go to that, you can see the full report. It's actually jolly interesting because my past experiences of adding stuff to the network has always been sometimes the latency inducers. They can make stuff slower. Yeah, take a look at that. It's quite an interesting report. Customer use case. I'm going to fly through before Shona kills me. Kelly Services, Office 365. This is what they were doing before. So they'd back all their Office. This is what we said. It works, but it's not great. Voice and video is too costly for MPLS. It depends on how you pay for your MPLS. Discovered where this is not necessarily always true, but in Kelly Services it was. Corporate DC is overloaded with all the employers. So yes. That happens. Remote mobility must use a VPN. So this is not ideal. Does not too costly and doesn't address mobility. Branch firewalls, 600 for firewalls, 70 for Link and Skype alone. I find that slightly astonishing, but not totally unbelievable. Continuous maintenance of IP and domains. Again, the overhead and cost of managing an Office 365 deployment, because of the way Microsoft decided to do things, is too complex, whether it's for the main site or whether it's for the branch sites. So this is what we did for them. So local internet breakouts, we forward door traffic, depending on the size of the office we're dealing with, we forward traffic from their network to ours using either a GRE tunnel or IPsec tunnel. We can talk about that if people are interested in that aspect. They sent all traffic, so it wasn't just a port 80 and 443. We put bandwidth throttling in place to ensure the Office 365 was well catered for, and the ability for remote workers to use Zscaler from their desktop. So it didn't matter where people were. They, like I say, they could be in a Starbucks, they could be in a hotel, they could be in an airport, whatever. They could use a desktop to gain access stuff, which was great and what they wanted. The benefits were that there's a single platform for web gateway bandwidth throttling and next generation firewall. So it was a single pane of glass, single logging instance as well, which is obviously quite good for resolution. There's nothing worse than having that situation where you've got an IPS, a URL filter, and a firewall, and try to tally up logs to see why something is or isn't working. So that makes a lot of things, and it reduces the amount of administration. We reduced rules from 600 plus to 10 in the firewalls, and that's included things like the URL filter as well. And immediately execute global configurations. Pushing policies or committing policies or whatever you want to call it is a pain. And one of the things that perhaps Zscaler doesn't often talk about, and again, it's perhaps because of my background in more traditional firewalls, is being able to deploy policies instantly with no, hassle. For anyone who's an experience of that with no hassle is from my point of view only perhaps wonderful. Fast deploy, 10 sites per day for 1 week, 25 sites. Rolling out Zscaler is not the same as rolling out other solutions. It's, from our point of view, all the stuff's Zscaler equipment is obviously all racked and powered and everything ready to go. It's a service that we provide, and you merely connect to it. So all that sort of stuff, we're almost ready. The only things that you have to do from your side is worry about things like the user authentication, integrating with ADFS or LDAP or AD or something like that, and forwarding the traffic to us. And there's a whole sort of collection of ways of doing that. So rollout can be extremely fast. And the final benefit on that was the visibility into all internet connections in all branches. Again, single pane of glass, single visibility of everything that's going on is a key benefit. What do we got here? High performance Office 365, 40% of bandwidth reserved for Office 365 during peak periods. YouTube capped at 20%. So this is, we do have a bandwidth monitoring sort of element to it, and this is sort of showing you what that is. But again, it's that prioritizing. We're not a traffic shaper. We're not doing anything particularly clever here, but what we are doing is allowing you to prioritize things in a very simple and straightforward and easy to manage way, which is what most people want for this sort of thing. There we go. 5 reasons why Zscaler for Office 365. Microsoft recommended deployment model. Microsoft's recommended deployment model. Yes, we are. Best possible user experience. Certainly from my own experience, that's absolutely true. Rapid deployment. Again, yes, we do. And maintenance as well. Rapid maintenance. It's fairly key. Investment protection and cost avoidance. Your MPLS isn't going to scale through the roof. You can guarantee how much your internet and your bandwidth costs are going to be. You don't need to worry about expensive hardware or licenses and all that sort of stuff. It's just simply the service that we provide. And then the visibility in all internet traffic within seconds from a single pane of glass. So there's the other thing, that if you are an existing Zscaler customer, is obviously this whole thing is free. So it's not a separate product or service that we provide. Anyone who subscribes to Zscaler also gets its Office 365 integration as standard. There's no, technically there's nothing for me to sell you here. So that's probably the 6th and final reason. Thank you very much indeed. I haven't quite gone over. Appreciate your patience, people that's hung on. It's just coming up to 3. I'm going to hand back now to Shona and perhaps take any questions that they have. It's always hard talking to yourself.
Thanks very much, Will. We have a partner in crime back on the line. So I'd just like to invite anyone to pop any questions onto the chat or the questions box. I will be posing them to Will over the next couple of minutes. So please do take time to drop in a few questions. And obviously, while you do so, I just want to thank Will very much for his time and for his comprehensive presentation. Really useful insight, hoping that you all got something out of today's session as well. And also thank everyone for their own time in attending. I do appreciate everyone has very busy schedules, and taking the time to take an hour to listen to Office 365 is much appreciated. We hope we've made it as useful for you as possible. So I'm just going to give 30 seconds for anyone to type any additional questions or pop their hands up on chat, and then I'll pose those to Will. Thanks.
Thank you, Shona. It's been a great pleasure. Well, thank you for giving us a platform to talk about our service and our offerings today. It is much appreciated. And again, just to echo what Shona was saying, it's thank you for taking the time out to listen to me talk on or drone on. My dulcet tones, I'm not quite sure are always that entertaining, but thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, so I do have one question. I'm going to break my usual rule because I've been asked to as regards commercials. So one person in the audience would like some sort of idea of costings and sort of license models, etc. If you've got any sort of brief details around that, feel free to share them now, Will.
I am not talking about pricing is above my pay grade. Some money. That's a question that I refuse to answer, I'm afraid, which is a bit of a cop-out. We buy it in blocks of users. We have three levels of service, and the Office 365 integrations included in all of those. I'm not, no. Should I quote RRP? No, I shan't. I'm sorry. I really am. But, I'll be shot.
I think what we can do from that is that's something that we'd be more than happy to chat to you. We'll have one of the Bytes, your Bytes account manager, contact you, understand your requirements in more detail, and provide that for you if that's something you are interested in. Yeah, because obviously Will comes from a technical background, so in terms of the commercial points, I would put him on the spot a bit there, in terms of the licensing model, etc. Have we got any other more technical questions or anything from the audience regarding how it works, what it can deliver, etc.?
Perfect.
Okay, so we've all gone shy on me, but thanks very much for taking the time to attend. Well, once again, just to reiterate, we have recorded today's session. I will make that available to everyone that attended. Thanks everyone for their time. If any questions do occur to you post-session, please do drop them an email to myself or to your Bytes account manager. Thanks everyone for attending, and thank you very much for Will's time as well. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Serena. Take care. Bye-bye.